Hello and welcome to BASW Recorded Voices, and thank you for joining us. My name is John Dudley, BASW Honorary Treasurer and Chair of the BASW Heritage Steering Group. To celebrate the International Day of Older Persons, we're showing a series of 3 recordings with BASW members explaining becoming and being social workers. Social workers often talk about the importance of listening to the voices of people with lived experience. But what about our own lived experience, the things that have shaped us personally and professionally? As part of BASW's 50th anniversary events, we are gathering these important fragments of our social work heritage to listen to voices of experience from our diverse and fascinating membership since 1970 right up to the present day. We also ask about lessons for the future. First, a little bit about our 3 interviewees. Nita Bacher is in conversation with Russell Hogarth, then Rena Phillips and Veronica Thomas talk to Gabby Savoli. Nita Bacher is chair of BASW Cymru. In 2013, she was presented with a BASW Cymru Lifetime Achievement Award for contributions to social work and the wider community. Nita also serves as a Justice of the Peace, Community Counsellor, and Vice Chair of the Standing Advisory Committee for Religious Education. Rena Phillips has been a member of BASW for many years and actively involved in her local Forth Valley branch in Scotland, which she has also chaired. She has worked in many differing social work departments. She is an adoption specialist and has also taught social work at the University of Stirling. Rena has substantial experience as a manager, researcher and social worker, and currently coordinates a post-adoption support service, which she has been involved with for the last 20 years. Veronica Thomas started her career as a family support worker and social worker in Haringey. Veronica qualified at Metropolitan University London in 2009. She's a proud mother and grandmother, and the sector she enjoys most in social work is in a leaving care team. Veronica also qualified as a practice educator in 2014 and has worked in referral and assessment teams, multi-agency service work, and has a background in social work with looked after children 16 plus. Each of our 3 interviewees talks openly and honestly about their life and career. There is power in each of their narratives as they describe their social work journeys, and in some cases, their physical journeys across continents. They talk about listening to and respecting the people we work with, the importance of good supervision and supportive colleagues, and much else. They speak with warmth and authenticity. I hope you will find them as engaging and illuminating as I have.
So, Nita, for the listeners at home, can I please have your full name and occupation?
Okay, my name is Nita Singh Bacher, and my occupation is a registered social worker in Wales.
Can I start by saying it's an absolute honour and a privilege to speak to you today. I've been looking at your career and wow, it's very impressive and very interesting. And I'd like to start with the first question based on your career. What made you become a social worker?
Interesting. I've been asked that many times over the years. It's sort of between my parents, my grandparents were all involved in community service. They were involved in the fight for India's independence, as you would know, 1975. And that has been always, I grew up, or my siblings also grew up with stories which my grandmother would narrate to us. Not my grandfather so much, about how things were and how we settled back in India from Pakistan, and all the involvement in community service. So I grew up in all that. Once I finished my education, that is my Bachelor of Arts, I wanted to do something which would get me a career in social work or others. But I was also involved in young women's group when I was in the in university in Chandigarh, and that also helped me to put solid foundations about what I'm going to be doing in the future. So I got married and then traveled to Nigeria, and then eventually came to the UK. Where
Wow.
I did my training in social work. When I came to Wales, I first started working as a project worker with BASW, probably 1895, and that was development work with women, with the Chinese women and the Batra Sikh community in the heart of Cardiff, which is Riverside, with the project. It was really to get the women involved in the daily life of the citizens, as well as to educate them and get them to forward their career. After 3 years of development work, I then applied for a secondment, which I got. It was a challenge, but I did get it. And then I studied my social work in UWIC, which is now Metropolitan University in Cardiff. So I did that and qualified in July 95, and later I went back to work for social services for a short time, because that's what BASW was. There was an agreement that once qualified you would work in statutory. When I worked in Ely, I loved my time over there. It was challenging, it was hard work. I had never worked in such challenging circumstances. I had lovely colleagues which supported me. And I was the one who would walk Ely grounds in the Grand Avenue and meet people. And lots of people would say to me, "Aren't you afraid?" And I said, "No, I'm not," because people welcome me. An advantage for me was working in Riverside. For one of the communities, I could speak the language. And then I'll talk about it a bit later, how I did bilingual assessments, speaking in their the citizens' language, and then translating it and then presenting it to court in English. That was something which was very useful to me. Also, I would tell them stories, how I grew up in India, how I came over here via Nigeria. I would give my personal examples on occasions to help women, and that helped me. And Rodri Morgan was the MP at that time, and we had a little do. The First Minister, the late First Minister, had a little do at that time. And so all these things, I was not the only one. I mean, I've had lots of encouragement from lots of different people from various communities. And I feel very humbled. I feel very humbled. One incident I remember, I had a young family from somewhere in Newport, and they had 5 children. One of the children was with disabilities. One of the children was very challenging, and the father just couldn't get along with the child for some reason. However, outcome was they were in foster care, and at the threat of being separated, all of them. Assessments usually lasted for about 6 weeks to 8 weeks. and then the report and presented to court. Of course, the judge was always there. And so I said, okay. I said, well, we'll present it. I'll ask the social worker to come in. But she says, no, let's have an informal chat. And I said, okay. And, it was music to the ears of the parents. And they said, well, as we've said this morning as well, we can manage 3, but we can't parent 5. And especially one is with disabilities, we don't have the skills. And that was, parents coming and saying that to you. And the outcome was the same as my recommendations. Social services agreed, and the judge. I have seen some of the children, but they don't know who I am. But, the parents, when you see them, you don't. And I'm thinking, you've done something good. When something goes wrong, everybody is on the bandwagon. Social workers, it's damn you do good, damn you don't do any good. Everybody is on the bandwagon. It's not just the social worker, it's the whole team, and it's supervision. I was very lucky in Bernardo's, Action for Children, and back to Bernardo's again, and others. My supervision was good. And if I struggled, I would ask my colleagues. I have never hesitated to ask. I was dealing with a culture. I was not born here. I had to learn the ways. My speech was different. Some of the local vocabulary was different, and I still struggle with that sometimes. They come up with what I call as West Wales anecdotes or something, and I'm thinking, what are you saying? But anyway, those things, that's me, and I never hesitate to ask. When I did my placement in a statutory body, I did it with youth justice, and I had 2 very good practice. Well, one was not a practice teacher, but Mark and Matthew, they were absolutely brilliant. I was the only woman on that team. And, everybody would go down, how are those boys treating you? And I said, well, why don't you come and spend a day with me and my team and come and find out? I was there for a good 6 months, and I learned. What did I learn? About caring, driven to help, working with young offenders, working across wider communities, writing assessments, and working in court, statutory required activities for them, working with appropriate adults. That was some good experience. I was in Action for Children doing comprehensive risk assessments. That's when I applied to become a Justice of Peace. And that's what I am still now as well. My main aim is to make, you cannot call anybody a criminal or bad unless you know something about them. Do not judge them by the outer look. That internal bias, that insensitivity which is in you, I have tried very hard not to have that. And wow. I just feel that's very, very important to me. Clothes are not important. I trained myself in diversity issues. My personal self through work training, and then I became a trainer with Action for Children as a diversity trainer for several years, and that itself was a great experience. We were 2 of us, and that was itself a great experience because you come to know what the young social workers are thinking.
Do you think social work's changed over the years?
Yes, social work has changed. Now, everyone thinks, let's think the American way, litigation. And I'm thinking, That's not it is what it's all about. It's everything. Oh, Facebook. We have to be careful how we manage ourselves. We have to be honest with our citizens, our service users. As long as you are honest, as long as you do your paperwork, as long as you get, if you don't know something, put your hands up and say, I will get back to you. And that's been my motto. So that, and the first thing is listen and respect. Listen and respect, because if you don't listen and respect the person, then I don't think you want to start. Of course, the threat of litigation is always there. The threat that somebody is going to challenge you, that's fine. I don't mind that. If a complaint comes, I don't mind that, because you can deal with it in your way.
So do you think social work practice should change in the future?
I think we should listen. We should be mindful. We should be respectful. We should be honest. The paperwork is going to grow more and more. Of course, social workers should be given more training. Diversity issues. We've seen everything about what's happening, the Black Lives Movement and other issues. And we cannot say that we don't know about these issues. The media covers them enough. We all know about them enough. We are all highly educated, and we don't need to be educated to know this. And that's there. Equal treatment is very important, and if we do that, but I do not want the older people to be looked after by robots. That is very frightening, even though I don't work with them, but I don't want a robot to be looking.
Well, I'll bring in Gabby doesn't know this, but you know, I like to be a bit maverick occasionally. I was talking to a couple of colleagues, telling them that I was interviewing you, and I asked if they had a couple of questions that they'd like me to ask you. And one is from Mark Trewin. Mark is the mental health social work lead with the Chief Social Worker for Adults, Department of Health. He was delighted I was talking to you, and he had a lot of questions. But
what did he say?
And I sent him your biography, which he said, "Wow, that's impressive." So you can have that. He said he wanted to know how you would support BASW to reflect the diversity in social work more efficiently.
That's been my aim, and I think our chair, Jerry, has really, increased that diversity. And we, I don't know if you know or don't know, I'm the chair for BASW Cymru, and I was in 2013 given the Lifetime Achievement Award. That was the best kept secret amongst the BASW committee members, and Dr. Neil Thompson, who read my recitation, written by Robin Mulster, who was the manager at that time. And I said, Robin, the day, and also to Jerry, and now to Alison, we are in the process of setting up a group where we will be actively looking and inviting perhaps retired social workers and say, if you were not BASW, what can we do differently? And even for the Heritage Project, I've given our professional officer, Meryl, all the names of people. And I said, if you talk to one or two, they'll give you some who were Asian or Black social workers. And I said, their stories will be very different, because we came from a different continent. We did our qualifications over here, and we worked with the communities. When social workers say, oh, it's very difficult to work with different communities. And I said, well, look at my example. Look at so-and-so's example, a chain of names who have been in child protection, who have been in adoption. And I said, well, we were not parented here. We were only educated here. And with degrees from our own birth country. We learned the culture. We learned all about, so what is so difficult about you? You've got the resources. You've got training which is put forward. You've got colleagues who will say to you, you've got translators. So we need to work together and respect people and move on. We do not want to say, I can't do this and hold hands up. We have to provide equal treatment to everyone.
Do you see any positives in home-based online working for social workers? Or do you want to keep it mainly face-to-face and a manual approach?
My first response, which when you were asking me the question, is social work is all about face-to-face work. It is. I will never say no to that.
Yeah.
We have to make some changes. If you are doing an assessment, you have to do it face-to-face. You have to get an environment right. Now, this is not my personal example, but I'll give you somebody's example because I'm not in direct practice now, who's given me that the social worker went to the window of this citizen, showed her face, not rung the bell and showed her face, and then put on her PPE, and then went inside the premises and said, we will maintain social distance, but I will conduct this interview. And I thought, and I was telling her, and I said, we will want you to write this for PSW. That's amazing. I would still want it to be continued. You can do a little bit of work online, but not everybody has the resources.
Things are out of your control, aren't they?
More funding, more social workers on the ground, more training for social workers. And it's not, they should be paid. They should, in this pandemic, social workers, I've touched on something which you didn't think of. Well, everybody's been recognized. Everybody's been recognized. And in Wales, they got £500. I'm not even sure if they were going to be taxed or not taxed. And come on, at least say something. Say something to us as social workers. Say something. You don't even recognize the rest of the care team, social care team, because it's not just my my people.
So outside of social work and this career you've had that's been amazing, what else interests you? What are you involved in? Is there anything? Is it the arts? Is it the community? Is it nature? What's your passion outside of social work? Which I know is a passion.
Yeah, outside social worker, I'm a local community councillor as well, and I was elected. I think in 2002 or 2004. I'm a Justice of Peace, appointed Justice of Peace. I had to give 2 interviews. I was one of the very few Asian magistrates, and then many more came. And of course, I'm one of the very few Asian community councillors. But I have a great interest in doing women's group, interfaith work. I'm a governor for the school, and I've been on the board of SACRE as a vice chair since 2001 as well. I speak at the interfaith conferences, which I have done many times, about citizenships, about diversity. And when I did training independently, the most popular training was working with children from diverse communities. And I used an Australian model to work on that, and that was very popular. And of course, my own personal examples were many. So this keeps me going.
Yeah.
I had seen the war in Pakistan, even though I was very young. Of Pakistan and India, and Pakistan and China, even though I was young. But you have ideas, you have that experience, and you can cope with it. I have coped with the difficulties of living in Africa and then coming here and settling and they have put me in a strong position.
Always been drawn, even as a child, to people who've been socially isolated or vulnerable, powerless, homeless, unemployed. There's something in me. I've got a kind of compassionate nature, and I don't know where I get it from, but it's me. I was born in Palestine before it became Israel. I've lived in Paris, I've lived in Vienna, I've lived in London, I've lived in Australia, and this is the longest we've been in any country, 50 years, nearly. We've been in this house in Scotland, and somebody said to me the other day, "Oh, you're Scottish." And I said, "No, I'm not Scottish. I'm a citizen of the world, please." But I love the beauty of Scotland. We've been very happy in Scotland. The thing that we spoke before, Gabby, was about the racism in my family, about the fact that my grandparents were murdered in the Treblinka concentration camp. And I would like to come back to that because there's a bit more to tell about that. But throughout, even as a young person, I realized that my mother had always the tendency to be not a very happy person. And I sensed that was to do with her parents dying the way they did. But it's a very interesting story that still continues now.
Talking about sort of your personality and why you do what you do, and that's probably one of my questions next, that social work, is it a profession, is it a vocation, or is it just you?
It's a bit all three of those, I would say. You have to be pretty sure. It is a profession, and you meet very vulnerable people. And I've done a lot of my social work with children and families. And that's really hard because I've got my own three, and I can see how they've been brought up and how some of the kids miss out on so much. And you can get attached, to people. And the issue of professional boundaries is very important, to keep to. But inevitably, with some people, you get on better. But I think our job is to get on with everybody. And in spite of sometimes, particularly if parents abuse their children, but they're human beings. And in the work that I do quite a lot, have done in adoption, what I found has been that the parents for whom, unfortunately and sadly and shockingly, their children get removed for adoption, they've had the same experience of not being parented, so they don't know, so it's kind of generational. So it's a vocation, it's a profession, and it's me. Social work is very varied. Every day is different. Some days you have spent the whole day in the office, so to speak, and you don't know what they've achieved, because partly it is that there is no solution to people's problems. They're too ingrained, they come too late. And, there's this thing about listening to people, being non-judgmental. Well, listening is one of the hardest things to do. And being non-judgmental is hard as well. So the first one is for a young child, then for an older person, and then for a woman in her mid-40s. So this young child was 9-ish, 10-ish. He was living in a residential care when I became involved. His mother, because of her own problems, decided she couldn't look after him. And so there was talk amongst the social workers and the residential staff that really he was young enough to live with a family. And that was the plan, perhaps long-term fostering or adoption. But this child was adamant that his mother could look after him. So a lot of work was done with him to try to give him this sad message that his mother said clearly that, you know, her life did not enable her to be a parent to him. So a lot of work was done. And can I say one of the things to say about social work, you're not on your own. You're doing this with other people. And without that, it would be impossible. You have to work with other people. So a team of us work with different, you know, bits to do, to say to the mother, to explain that he wasn't accepting it. And would she be willing to write a letter to him to explain that? And a lot of work was done with him to tell him that a letter was coming from his mother to explain to him. And the day arrived and this was all arranged. Gabi, when the letter, so we made it as sensitive as we could. When the letter was read to him, he howled. He howled. I cannot use another word. And that howl is still with me, you know. He howled, he howled, he howled. In the end, he was prepared to move, but it just tells you the poignancy of that situation. And that's what I remember. With the older person, when I did my CQSW, I had a placement in Stirling Royal Infirmary. And I'd never been in a hospital. And I got the case of an elderly gentleman who had come in. He was maybe 79. He had come in because his legs were ulcerated. He didn't have good circulation. So he would come in, get out, come in, get out. And then it came the day when he was told, we can't do much more to you, do you know? You just need to be careful about your legs and do this and do that and so forth. The person in charge of the ward was a male nurse, and it was my luck that this male nurse and I got on really well. I thought that he was kind of a semi-social worker. And when I became working with this gentleman, he said to me, Rina, I am not ready to go. You know, I can't go home because I can't manage. I'm not ready to go into residential care. And I don't just want to go home and then tomorrow or something I'm in residential care. I need time. I'm losing my liberty. I'm losing my identity. I need time. And there's this male nurse saying to me, Rina, he needs to get out. I need the bed, do you know? And so I sat down with this male nurse and I said, listen, this is important, you know. Could we have another 2 weeks? And he says, well, okay, for you, 2 weeks. So we worked with him. 2 weeks came and he wasn't ready. So I had to go back. I'm cutting this short. And I got another 2 weeks, you know. And he went to a home. It was called the William Simpson Home. He'd been in the army, you know, for people who'd been in the army. And, you know, that kind of the impact on me was, I was still in my 30s, 40s, but I was dealing with a person in the sort of nearly 80s, you know, and it gave me a perspective, how it is, how it would be for me, you know, and all these issues which I had to, I mean, now that I'm in my you know, I'm in a few weeks 80, I'm quite aware of all these things and mortality and all that, but not at that time. So it's a kind of was a learning experience for me. And I felt for this guy and I followed him up and he sort of settled fairly well. And that was really a piece of work that I was very proud of and I find very difficult, but very satisfying as well. And then my last one was, you know, how when you train to be a social worker, and I was a teacher of social work, I'll tell you a little bit about where I've done. You know, I worked in Stirling University, and I was a teacher of social work for 12 years. And the students always say to you, they want to change the world. They've come as social workers, they want to change the world, you know. And maybe that's how I thought as well. So anyway, one day on intake, I was an intake worker as opposed to long-term. A woman came and she says, I need to speak to somebody. I said, please, I'm on duty. Please come in, sit down. And she says, what's your name, Rina? She said, Rina, I just need to say something to you. It might take a bit of time. I don't want any service or any help from you. I just want you to listen to me. And what she wanted to say was that for 20 years she'd been abused by a husband. When he drank, was abusing her. When he didn't drink, he was okay. But the point she wanted to say to me, and she took an hour and a quarter to tell me all about this. And when she finished, she got up and she says, Rina, thank you so much. You're the only person I've ever told this to. I needed to get it out of my system. So thank you very much and goodbye. But my salvation, one of them, was to come home and to cook a meal and to satisfy 5 people. I'm quite a good cook. I'm interested in food, you know. And I thought I would come. So Bill would play with the kids with games and things and so forth. And I would come and I say, I'm in the kitchen. And then I cook a meal. And people said, oh, Mom, this has been really good. Thank you. It's important to have debriefing, you know, from these issues. The impact on you is that you need to talk about it, you know. You need not to get it out of your system, but to talk about what's happened, you know, and so forth. So the importance of colleagues has always been very important to me. Kate Pride, my colleague who you also interviewed, we were talking about it the other day to each other. We also had to do emergency duty. I don't know whether Kate mentioned that, but we had to do at the end of the day, when your day finished at 5, you were on duty till 9 o'clock in the morning on your own. So when I came home after a day's work, the phone would start ringing, you know, and you were on your own. And Kate and I were saying that in some very dangerous situation we were, you know, and impacting on your family life. I was speaking to my son, Ned, who lives in Singapore. He's in his 50s. And I was telling him I was taking part in that and talking a bit about it. And he says, you know, Mom, I remember that when you came home and then instead of cooking for us, you had to go out. So, you know, it's those kinds of things that, you know, the impact on you being frightened, it being difficult, being very attached to people, you giving, they're giving to you. No one day is the same. Social work is not about 2 and 2 makes 4. It's got great variety. It's got great colleagues. You know, some people have said to me, oh, people only go into social work to solve the problems. No, I've never found anybody like that. I just found people who were trying their best under difficult circumstances. So that's a bit about, so for me, social work was stimulating, uplifting, challenging, very hard, and very much the profession for me. And so social work needs to be seen in the context, you know. We can't just talk about people in the context of services not being available, austerity, unemployment, all the things I was saying before. I knew I wanted to be a social worker, and there was a course for women with young children. So I got the postgraduate diploma in social studies from London University. So I had a law degree, a postgraduate diploma. I had an MSc in applied social research. So and my kids were now all in school, you know, my youngest, and I always said that I would not go and work full time until my kids were in school. So enthusiastically, I rang the training officer in Stirling. I said, Rina Phillips, I've got this, this, and this. I would like to work as a social worker. And she said to me, well, Rina Phillips, you are unqualified. Boom, boom. Because to do a social work, you had to have the CQSW, you know, the Certificate of Qualification in Social Work. And you ain't got that, you know. Well, I came home and I said to Bill, this is really off-putting. Do I want to go back to work? Because I was a bit torn. I wanted to stay with my kids, but I knew I should, you know, it was always also good to work, you know. So then somebody said to me, why don't you ring this other lady, Kay Richards? She's the director of Clackmannan Social Work. She's quite a good lady. So I ring her, and so being a bit diffident, you know, I've got this and this, and I would like, you know, to do social work. And she says to me, Rina, tomorrow morning at 9:30, you're in my office, she says. You know, we will talk about this. So we got in. And she says, right. You won't get anywhere without a CQSW. You need to go 1 year in Sterling. At that time, you could do 1 year in Sterling. You did this. And then you come back and maybe you will work, in Aloha, social work, and so forth. And then she says, well, I'll set up an interview for you. I need to have an interview. So I go for the interview. And I sit there for 15 minutes, nothing happens, And she comes out, she says, I haven't forgotten about you, Rena. And there are these counselors in the room, and they're getting very uptight with me because I didn't have a job for you, but I've created a job for you as an unqualified social worker. And they are mad with me. So when you come into the room, so this was my sort of beginning, I'm qualified. Somebody in the goodness creates a job for me and all that. Anyway, I could feel the atmosphere, but I got the job. So I did that. I worked for a year. And then I got my CQSW. I applied again to Central Region as it was. I was a generic social worker, doing everything for about 3.5 years. So I was a home finder for about 9 years, doing adoption, fostering and adoption work. It was a really good job because you could be practicing social work, but also be a manager. So it was a combination. That's what attracted me. So I did that for 9 years. And then one day, a very good mate of mine, Rosemary, who was working in Sterling University, came to me and said to me, Rena, I'm going to ask you something, and you cannot say no, and just sit down and listen. I feel that I need to go back and do a bit of social work. I'm teaching social workers, and I haven't done social work for a long time, So how about I go and do your job, in adoption and fostering, and you come and you be a lecturer in Sterling Uni. I said to them, they'd never accept this, Rosemary. My social work will never allow me to do that. But they did, So I was for 12 years a lecturer and a researcher in Sterling University in the Social Work Research Center, so teaching and doing, and it was really social work because you had to find practice placement for students and so forth. So it was really social work, okay? And then I retired in 2002, and I went freelance. And for the last 20 years, what I have done, I have created a small charity called Post-Adoption Central Support. One of the issues about adoptive families, they do a tremendously hard job of taking on really damaged kids, and there's still very little support. Things don't change, So when I was teaching, I was really interested in providing support, but I was still in the university. But when they heard that I'd left, they said to me, would you work for us to push for post-adoption support? So I was employed by the families, which was quite a bit unusual. I wasn't employed by any local authority or whatever. And then 3 local councils gave us funding to do this, to carry on this charity. And we've done great works. We've done publications on attachment issue. 18,000 have been distributed all over the place. We spend some of the money to allow people. So it's really an all-round adoption support. But now, interestingly enough, because of this virus, Gabby, we are very small. There's 3 of us that run this, and we have a very high reputation. But we can't do all the webinars and virtual meetings. It's beyond us. We're really small to do that. And one of the councils, the money was cut, and so they decided to cut our money. So I'm only now winding up this post-adoption support. I'm still going to work till December. And can I say I'm a bit unusual because I have a lot of experience both as a practitioner and researcher. Mostly you find people decide to be either researchers or practitioners, but I've got like 40 publications, 14 research grants. You know, I've always been interested in both of them. So that's just a way of just illustrating how I came to be in, again, a variety of settings, you know. And within Central Region, I worked in one office and then I was put in another office. Again, variety, you know, and things. When you're doing daily work in day after day, as I was telling you, we never had a time to talk about ethics and human rights and whatever. And so I decided I need to join BASW because I want to talk about things like that, you know, to see, to see are we doing what we should be doing and whatever. So that was my, it's, I thought, no, I need to join. And we had very happy days.
Why did you become a social worker? And that's quite a big question. What kind of made you become a social worker and the background to that?
Okay, so I became a social worker. Well, I've always wanted to work with families. So I did childminding, I did nursery work, so I got my qualification in that field. Then I did family support work. But in between, I did health and social care. And that prompted me, after doing work experience in a leaving care service, women's refuge, made me, it got my interest in social work. And because I come from a leaving care background, that I was able to identify with that. And then that, made me look at, okay, well, maybe when I became a foster care, when I became a family support worker, I then thought about, well, maybe that's my journey to become a social worker. So that's where it peaked from. It peaked from me actually always wanting to work with people, then doing some training in health and social care, and then me being able to identify with the young people I was working with or supporting in the leaving care service. And I qualified in 2009. So I feel I'm still very much in the early stage of social work, because I know people who've been in there for many, many, many moons. So I'm still in the early stage. I feel like my experience is not as great as many people. However, I will also introduce, I've also got a care background, and I've got a variety of experience. So I've also got been a foster carer. And so one of the things that happened to me is when I was doing my foster training to become a foster carer, I then was only then able to identify that I was actually in foster care. So that was a turning point in my life in many ways. And why that was a turning point in my life, because when I was doing family support, I went to do a visit at a home, and that home had a familiar feel about it, but I didn't know what it was. And then what happened, that really bothered me for a little while, but then I left it. And then when I became a foster carer and I had to talk about my own experience, I was then able to join the dots and realize that place that felt familiar to me was a place that I was placed in. And I did not stay in that placement. So as a social worker and working in a leaving care team and all my experience, it really, really helped me in my social work journey. And I believe it's the emotional impact and what happens to care leavers after they've left care. I was very fortunate. When I left care, I was prepared to leave care at the age of 16 and a half. I had my own kitchenette. I remember being given £13 a week, and I had to shop on that £13 a week. And I made that £13 last me. So I had to do my own cooking, I had to budget, and that was really good because that put me in a good place. And then, but I don't think emotionally I was ready. And I look at it that I had a worker, and she was brilliant, because after I left, she followed me. She didn't have to. She did that because she wanted to, because she was like a mother figure to me. And I think that many young people don't get that. They leave care and they're left on their own. And being left on your own, it's not a good thing. And I was also fortunate, I still had a good family as well. So although I was in care, my family was a very important role and played a very important part in my life. In today's society, I don't think we've got that. I feel that when young people leave care, they've got nobody to support them. So they turn 18, we put them in a flat, they some independence, we do visits whenever, but there's no emotionals. That emotional bond is not there. I had that, but I only had that because I had a good relationship. This person took me under their wing. But my other people who were in care with me, some went on drugs, and they died. So I lost a lot of friends. And I also have a lot of them who's also still unemployed. So out of my group, I'm the only, when I think about it, I'm the only success story. And that happens to this day to many young people who are in care. And I think that's what makes me more sad. So when I'm working with the young people, I have this philosophy is that you can achieve anything you want. Nothing's a barrier. So I always try to push them. They never understand why I'm trying to push them, because it's my own experience making me feel I need to be that figure for them, to push them, to help them, to move up that ladder, not to become what society thinks we have conditioned them to think you're another statistic. This is what the expectations is. You are in the system and may not amount to nothing. You're expected to be unemployed, probably not progress. I mean, things are changing, but that's what you normally get. When you look at society now, nothing has changed. Care leavers back in the 80s and care leavers now still fall within that same box. They still fall within the high unemployment, homelessness, drug use, criminal activity. It's no different from when I was in care. And I think that's what, for me, is an experience that has stayed with me. Becoming a social worker, I know I can't change everything, but I want to change. Even if it's one person I help, I want to do that. And so when I'm working as a social worker, I become the person that's nurturing but boundaried. I have friends who've known me for over 20 years, and to this date, they don't know I've been in care. And I guess maybe that's about the stigma that was attached, that's still kind of being attached to being care. And when I met this lady, she spoke about her care experience and, how she's using it to empower young people. And I sat there and I thought, wow, she sounds like me. She sounds like she's made something of herself. She's not become the norm or what society might have expected for her. And she was in care at the same time as me. But she had turned her life around, And for me, when I was in care, I was homeless. I went to children's home. I ran away. I did everything, you name it, that young people do today. So I understand them. And I guess because that's all associated, and to talk about it was not one of the things I wanted to do before. I didn't tell anybody. So that part of my identity, in a way, was hidden. My family knew about it. My children, my grandchildren, they all knew about it. But people who outside that inner circle of me did not know. And I think it's important that young people are proud of their identity. And it was important that I found a voice, even at my age, to become proud of my identity. And so it was after meeting this lady, I decided to start to talk about my experience and hope that up and coming social workers can see that people who are in care have a world of experience, and they want support. They don't want to be labelled, but they want somebody who's got faith in them and never, ever give up on them, because that's how I feel. And most of my young people, I say all of my young people I work with, they'll tell you I'm there. I am fair, I am boundaried, but I'm there. And I think I don't judge them. And I think what we have a habit of doing as social work, and I can speak because I hear it all the time, is judging them. Oh, they're going missing because, you know, they want to be wild, or they want to take drugs, or they want to do whatever it is, or they're hanging around with these people because because maybe they don't want to follow boundaries or rules, or they don't accept it. It's not about that. It's about finding people who accept us, finding ways to be yourself and be proud of who you are. And I guess I was in that category because I had to fight to become who I am and who I am today. And it was not an easy road. You know, it was a very hard journey, and I had to do that hiding who I was. And I should not have had to hide who I was. I should have been proud to say, well, hey, this is me. I was in care. This is my experience. But I could not share that up until last year. And that's after 30 odd years. So it's a very, very, very long time. So yes, I would like social workers to look on young people and see, you know what, what if it was my child? You know, what if it was my sister? How would I want to be supported? You know, don't treat them as a piece of paper, you know, because it was that one person who did not treat me as a piece of paper that made that big difference in my life. If she had treated me like a piece of paper, I was just a name on a piece of paper, then maybe things would have been very different for me. But she took the time and she came to me when she didn't have to. You know, she came to visit me at my house. When I had my daughter, she came to visit me then. You know, she bought me little gifts. She kept in touch. And she meant the world to me. Yes, I had my family, but this was somebody external of my family, you know, that held me in a place that had made me find the faith in myself, you know, because although we have families, our families are out there, because we feel that we're not a liking part of the society. So we are the disadvantaged, we are the maladjusted, we are the challenging. That's how people categorize, you know, young people who are coming out of the care. There's something wrong with us. That's how they don't see you, the person first. They think, well, why was you in care? Your parents couldn't look after you, or you wasn't, you know, your parents may have been on drugs, they've been on alcohol, you were abused. People see that. They don't see you as a person. And that one person had faith in me. She saw me, not a piece of paper, not my behavior. She saw me and she focused on me. And I remember one thing about my social worker, so I don't do it to my young people, is that I remember he came to visit me in the home. And I think it was my 16th birthday. It might be my 16th birthday. And he bought me a card. He posted me a card, if I remember. And I chucked it away. I did. I always remember that, chucking it away. And then he came to see me, and everybody else's card was there. And he said to me, "Where's my card?" And I felt embarrassed because he hadn't done anything to me to make me dislike him, but I didn't want his card because he reminded me I was in care. And but he was really nice. And then after that, you know what? I saw all the nice things he'd done for me, and not all how I wanted to see him. So now, even when I've got young people, I don't give them cards. It's not in a horrible way, but I always make sure I ring them on their birthday and say, "Happy birthday." So it's more personalized. So if you just sent me the card and not come, I wouldn't have valued him so much. But the card meant nothing. But his presence meant everything to me as well. So that was the difference as well. So I think we need to look at the young people that we're working with. We need to look at the children we're working with. We need to look at them as people, not people that's just been placed in care and we're doing a job or a duty to look after them. But maybe put our hearts into it, because I think the heart element is missing. So for me, that is very, very, very important. When I'm doing my job, I do it with my heart. Because for me, I remembered it was special for me to be taken somewhere. And when somebody takes me out for a meal, even in my personal life, it's not somebody paying them to do it. So why should somebody pay me, and say, okay, I've paid for your meal, let me put in that money there. Then that's false. That's not real. So to me, that is very important, even up to today, and it stays with me. I think we've still got a long, long, long way to go, because I think the human element of it it's gone. And that's what we need to bring in. I think people who are training now, it's more about the book. It's more about getting the theories right. And, I'm not saying the theory is not important. The theory is very important. However, you've got to work. It's got to entwine. It's got to work together. You can't say, okay, this is the theoretical side of something, and that's how that person functions. You've got to get to know that human side of the person. Be more humane when doing your work with young people and with families. And families, for me, I have this big thing about trust. Don't promise anything, but let them know exactly where you're going with them. Don't go in and say, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. You can't. So I think social work, we're still a long, long way to go. And I feel that it could have been, in all this time, especially where care leavers are concerned, I don't see much change. If anything, we've got the Leaving Care Act, and that's supposed to be better. We've got the Social Care and Social Work Act of 2017, that's supposed to be better. But all those are paper exercise to me. I believe we need to do the groundwork as well as the paper exercise. When they're under 18, we're being held. We hold them together by doing this, we're doing that, we're running around. But when they turn 18, everything drops away. And they're left on their own, and they're left to deal with that emotional crisis. And, apart from maybe the PA or the social worker, there's hardly anything else in place. Would we do that to our children? Would we say when you turn 18, throw them out and say, well, you're on your own? We don't. We don't say, you've left home today, you're at home today, because you may have maybe Asperger, because you turn 18, you're out there on your own. We don't care about you anymore. So we need those things of social work. We need to look at what happens when they turn 18. Just because they turn 18 and they're adults, it doesn't mean that they can cope. That's when they become more vulnerable. That's when the real social work can take place, because the young people start to feel sense of helplessness, hopelessness, rejection. All those things come into place because there's nobody there to care for them. And one of my success stories, I had a young man from Albania, and he wanted to be a aero engineer, and I pushed him, and he got into Harris Westminster, and I was like, yes. He got there. But when he tried to tell me things like, oh, he wanted to live with his friends, he was very destructive, I said, no. I said, I'm being the parent now. And I did turn into the parent. I said, I'm going to override you. And when I went to meetings, people said to me, yeah, but this is what he said. I said, no. If I'm the parent, this is what I'm going to do for him. And he got through. And he's got a scholarship, and he's at university. And that's a big, big thing for me. And I thought, wow, this is a young man who's actually done something, turn around. And when he sees me, he said, yeah, you were right, And I said, yeah, I know. And I actually believe that we need to sometimes turn on the parent mode, the real parent mode, not just say, okay, we're a social worker and that's what we're limited to doing, but be the parent and say, yes. You may tell me, I'm not saying take away their rights, but I'm saying sometimes we have to make decisions for them to enable them to see that the bigger picture, not just the short-term picture, but the long-term picture, the holistic picture is that you're looking further ahead. We're demonized. and I think that's so sad because we're there to do a job, just like the police, just like the doctors. One of the saddest things I felt is that when they were saying key workers, they had police, they had firemen, they had nurses, where were social workers? If I went to queue up somewhere, apart from Sainsbury's, I couldn't get in. I had to queue up with everybody. But I'm a key worker because I do, if anything, I think social work, we become the counsellors, we become the housing officers, we become everything for these young people and the families, but yet we're still demonized, So I think we as social workers have to find a way of putting ourselves in a good light and not seen as the people who are bad. That's where the aggression comes out with people. They don't value us the way we should be valued. And I think that's one of the saddest things about us as social workers is that I feel that we're not valued enough. And maybe because we don't value ourselves enough. Maybe we need to value ourselves, our profession, and say, well, I'm doing a good job. When I was talking about me being in foster care, I remember going to foster care home. Nobody told me I was going to foster care home. They just said to me, let's take you to this lady. And I remember, and they took me to this place and I looked and they said, you've got to stay there. And I thought, no, I'm not staying there. And I ran away. So maybe that's why a lot of young people run away from foster care, because they don't want to stay there. I'm not saying put them back with their family, because they also tried to put me back with my family, with my mum. And I didn't want to stay there because I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel happy there. So what is the right medium? How do we work with that? Finding the place that the young people want to be, maybe finding suitable families, maybe talking to them about what, where they're going, what needs to happen, why they're going, instead of saying, okay, you're going into foster care. I think that still happens. We move, we say, you're going into foster care. And a lot of the time, there's not much explanation, That's why young people then probably runs away from wherever they're placed. They run away. And then we see them as challenging. We're not understanding why they're running away. What's the story behind it? It's because they don't want to be there. I didn't want to be there, but I was placed there. And like I said, I didn't think I'd stay the night. I can't really even remember sleeping there. I think they took me there. And I said, I'm going to see my friends. And then I never returned. That's what I remember. I slept on park bench because I didn't want to go back. So, but I would say I made it. I'm proud of who I've become. I'm not unhappy about the person I've become. I'm very proud. I've trained to be a social worker, and I hope that my experience is helping a lot of young people. And I've worked in referral assessments, and that was very heartbreaking for me. And the reason why referral assessment was heartbreaking for me, because it reminded me of my time of removing from care. And I thought, I haven't got that, I haven't managed that emotions about moving children from care, from their family. Because as harmful as it is, they want to stay. I didn't want to stay with mine, don't get me wrong, but I had a family that I wanted to stay with, not my mum, but I had family, but I was not allowed to stay with them. And I think that's something that we don't consider. We need to consider other family members. But that was one of my experience. So I could not work in referral assessment because I found it very difficult when I had to do that removal. It was a very, very difficult experience for me. And then I worked with foster children. And I enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that because I think I was able to make changes, make the foster carers understand I was on the side of the children. I also balanced it. If they were doing something wrong, I tried to balance and say, well, but I made sure that those children that were in their care got what they needed. It wasn't about, well, that child, you having a family feast, and that child is not having that family feast. And I would see that child and say, you let me know anything that's going on. I want to know. We did visits, went out, never, it was me and that child on a one-to-one visits, I always made sure I saw that child on one-to-one. I always made sure that I knew what was going on in the home. I looked at food on an unannounced visit. I met the child when the foster care was least expecting me. you know, to make sure things are in place. And that's absolutely vital. Yeah, a lot of my young people that I work with, you know, they would say, I fought for them. I fought, you know, for them to have keys. I remember one young person saying to me, prior before I came to join him, and we had a meeting, his previous social worker said he couldn't have keys to the home. I said, why not? The foster care said, oh, he might be friends. So I said, okay, let's draw up a plan, you know? And I said to him, if we give you the keys and you bring friends or you don't follow the rules, the key will be removed from you. Because this young man used to have to wait in the rain, in the snow, for his foster carers to let him in, but if they weren't there when he finished. In social work, just remember, you're doing it with heart. Just do the social work with heart. Even if it's a little miniature change you've made, always recognize that. Always make that person or the family, the child, whoever that you're working with, recognize that change that they've made. It doesn't matter how small. It can be something as silly as coming out for the day, you know. It can be something as maybe attending an appointment. I don't know. Any minute change, improvement, always recognize, because from that minute improvement could slowly come greater things. So that's what I'd like to say, to leave them with. Just always recognize any improvement and let them know that you've observed it and you've seen that improvement. I think that's important. Yeah. Do it with heart.
Firstly, I'd like to thank our interviewers, Russell Hogarth and Gabby Zavoli. Secondly, thank you to our 3 interviewees for their candour and their insights. Thirdly, thank you for joining us today. If you have a tale to tell and would like to be interviewed, do get in touch. You can email heritage2020@baswa.co.uk. You can also listen again to these recordings if you watch the BASW updates and websites for details. So many powerful messages from today. Social work is difficult. It can be frightening, but we work alongside others and are never alone. We need to use our heads, but in social work, we should always do it with heart. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.